things have changed. That narrative we've all been told to follow, go to school, get a job, buy a house, start a family, and then maybe be happy. Well, that narrative has been broken.
The system is always trending towards disorder, and there's just no escape.
Gen Z has been subject to a lot of trauma.
They seem to have lost their social skills.
From the rise of the digital world to countless government failures and a complete shutdown of society, you are left with millions of people that are lost, lonely, and hopeless with no future to strive for.
More and more people suffer from isolation and loneliness.
Depression has almost become normalized.
This isn't a story of politics, agendas, or reformation.
Apparently, Gen Z is aging really rapidly.
Rather, one of Gen Z being a failed generation.
Are people just okay with the way that the economy is right now?
Young people have no hope.
That was a crazy soundbite.
For you to even start to understand Gen Z, you have to understand their biggest influence, and that's none other than the rise of technology and the internet.
One site that's gaining enormous popularity is YouTube.
Some people might just like having a bunch of things going on at the same time to fill their attention spans.
Children all over the country are glued to different screens playing.
That sounds Gen Z.
Skibbity Fortnite, skibbity Fortnite.
Okay, that's Gen Alpha right there, the skibbity bit.
Gen Z, or Generation Z, is comprised of those born between the years 1997 and 2012. Though often referred to as a time of crisis, from the millennium to the global financial crash to the supposed end of the world.
They base this on interpretations of the Mayan calendar.
These years instead brought some of the most impactful revelations, from the smartphone to widespread home internet and social medias like Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram. Now you ask, why is this relevant? Gen Z was born into the tech boom. People now had infinite access to global communication and information, all from their pocket. At first glance, innovation seems harmless, but need I restate, an entire generation didn't get to see these changes as innovations, but rather as the norm. Gen Z has grew up doing everything on screens, from messaging friends to watching videos, playing games, dating, recording their lives, and even going as far as building their very identity and beliefs.
I do have to say, as someone that was born in 1997, man, the first 10, maybe 11 years of my life were drastically different than the world we live in today. The world we live in today, where it's just, we're constantly being bombarded with information, screen time, blue light, all of these dopamine hacked videos that are really just designed to get your attention and make you feel sort of connected or keep you watching. That was not the first 10 years of my life. And so, a lot of older folks talk about, your generation is cooked because you guys are looking at screens all the time, and it wasn't like that when we were kids. Well, I'm somebody that kind of saw both sides of it, and I actually get what they're saying. I think there's a certain mental fatigue that we carry around today that maybe people didn't in the past, because we're just being bombarded with so much.
You see, what at first was a novelty soon became a dependency. People weren't just playing on their Nintendo DS for 15 minutes a day. They were now hooked on their devices. The bleak reality is we are in what I would refer to as the digital dark age. Gen Z is violently addicted to their phones, video games, and adult content. They resort to short-term pleasures to distract them from their depressing realities. People have become so hooked they are often on their phones for 10 plus hours a day. No better thanks to short-form content, dopamine hooks, and addictive algorithms. The ability to build social profiles has fueled collective narcissism and need for self-status among young people.
That's real.
As everyone actively tries to make their lives seem better online. Social media has completely destroyed the attention span of Gen Z, with people unable to focus on a video for more than a second.
I can feel my brain tingling to get a
Subway
glimpse
Surfers.
of my phone.
This has been worsened by Gen Z unable to complete everyday tasks like walking or eating without music or Family Guy funny moments playing. This is no exaggeration, and in fact it's a heavy underplay. This whole phenomena is described as brain rot, as it's so overstimulating it might as well be rotting your brain.
I hate to say it, but this guy's actually on the money. I started realizing that lately my brain rot content is listening to political podcasts and news podcasts first thing in the morning when I'm getting ready. And I've kind of lied to myself that it's not some sort of brain rot, or that it's not an unhealthy relationship, because, how is this different from, somebody in my dad's generation who listened to Sean Hannity or talk radio when they would drive to work in their truck, right? But it's like they had a time and a place for that. They weren't listening to it from the second that they woke up, into the shower, you know, and then as they're walking out the door, it was once they hit the vehicle. And then once they're in their job, they're, you know, locked in, socializing, talking with people, not hearing as much of this noise. Whereas, I've got my headphones on when I'm walking into the office. I listen from the time I woke up, in the car ride, in headphones on the way to the office, and in the office while I'm working. If it's a personal task, I'm listening. It's like there's no point at which I detach from the content.
Level 5 got Riz, Livy done rizzing up baby Gronk, Ice Spice what the dog doing, Skibbity Toilet in real life only in Ohio.
And it gets better. In a world more connected than ever, you have the biggest loneliness epidemic we've ever seen.
Gen Z has a loneliness problem.
Gen Z is the loneliest generation in America.
You look lonely. I can fix that.
The cause for this is undeniably stress about the future, overstimulation, and social media. But instead of addressing these issues, Gen Z will often refer to thugging it out and coping. People rarely go out like they used to, and the majority of interactions are online.
This might be a hot take. I think part of Gen Z's isolation problem, the reason that we're so lonely as a generation, is partially financial. You know, old generations could do more of these social things because they had the extra money to do it. And look, I'm not saying that only if you have good money coming in can you have a good time, but you know, there was articles that came out recently saying, Gen Z is going to clubs less often than their parents were at their age. You know, why aren't the kids going out? Well, I think part of it is that the kids don't have money, and the kids have been brought up or raised to say, look, a lot of that stupid stuff we did when we were kids, I'm talking about the older generation here, you know, getting drunk, partying, whatever, you guys don't really want to do that. That's not healthy. That's not the best optimal way to live. And so the kids listen to that. And, you know, obviously another part of the loneliness is the technology, you know, is the isolation. But I really feel for a lot of single people today in Gen Z is, it's hard to meet quality guys, quality girls. I think one of the few places left that you can really do that and meet somebody meaningful is church. But other than that, it's like, where do you meet people?
As a result, you have millions upon millions of people with no one to talk to or find real connection with. Gen Z is resorting to living on TikTok or in the metaverse or even finding AI girlfriends. Undoubtedly, that was a lot to take in. But what does all of that even mean? Well, it's not looking good. You have a generation that can't focus, which leads to worse academic results, with many Americans unable to point out their own country on a map. And then this, by extension, leads to greater unemployment rates, with millions already hating the system and not wanting to work at all.
I actually saw this article a while back. It says, IQ scores in the US have fallen for the first time in decades, studies suggest. And if you actually go down, it talks about how this is specifically young people and that their IQ is lowered for those with less education. And so I think this sort of argument that this article might be making, or at least what it's pointing to here, is if you're not doing anything to sort of play with your brain's elasticity, education, math equations, whatever it is to keep your brain strong, like it's a muscle, right? That the dopamine from social media and a lot of the things that Gen Z are sort of digesting in our generation today might actually lower your IQ. And that doesn't surprise me, because actually, there was a period there where I was not reading anything. I was on social media more often, and I actually felt that my brain was duller. I put social media sort of down for a little bit, or started using it less, and I actually went and started reading books more. And believe it or not, just that simple change, I could tell that my brain was a little bit sharper than it had been.
People are putting their beliefs exclusively on what big tech companies force to them in algorithms for 10 hours a day. And when they're done with the outside world, they shut away, fuel their addictions, and let their life amount to nothing. But this isn't their fault. The fix isn't as simple as just turning off the phone or deleting social media. There's a lot more to it. In fact, the entire generation was already failed from the start.
I remember when I was a kid, it was like the crazy Christians online that were talking about how the smartphone is going to bring the devil into our society, and the smartphone is the beast, basically. And there was a lot of these kind of conspiracy theory posts, and it was like kind of funny, and people made fun of it. I'm actually starting to look at it like, the smartphone is the beast, dude. It's actually crazy how much of our attention it steals from us, how much of our happiness it steals from us. It's just flooding us with dopamine. I mean, it is like the hedonic treadmill of hedonic treadmills. You're constantly just feeling good, but actually feeling worse over time staring at the phone. I'm just saying, maybe those Christians were onto something.
Somebody explained to me why I make over 3 times the federal minimum wage, and I cannot afford to live.
Now, the British pound has fallen to its lowest level ever.
From the CDC suggesting major problems with regard to the mental health of our adolescents.
For younger generations, the cost of living has increased so much.
More than 1/3 of young people are spending much higher proportions of their income on rent.
I have just one question. Why change? Gen Z undeniably has countless issues, from their attention span, mental health, physical health, addictions, and even with false personas online, they hold a true lack of self-worth. This has been getting worse and worse by the year. But once again, why change? You see, Gen Z is aware of all of this, everything that's in front of them, but there's no desire or need to change this. Why would you care about your addictions or bad habits if you're constantly told the world's going to end tomorrow, that you'll never be able to start a family or even buy a house? Wow. This is part of the reason Gen Z doesn't want to work 70 years of their life and still not be able to afford to live. Things that have been the norm for generations have all ended with Gen Z. There is no debate. The system is broken. Education, housing, healthcare, retirement, all broken. Gen Z is at the forefront of a cultural revolution, witnessing the demise of every traditional norm, and they don't just struggle with housing and living, but also have a very different dynamic when it comes to these two things. From both parents being forced to work in order to live, which overall leads to less time the family has with each other, which by extension leads to breakup and divorce, making a single parent household all too common. And it gets worse. If the family is not raising the kids, well, the education system has them covered.
I actually want to build off of what he's saying there. He's saying, look, if parents are spending less time together, they're more likely to maybe get divorced. You know, I think maybe that's up to interpretation. I haven't seen stats on that. I wouldn't be surprised. But I actually do know that the leading cause of divorce in the United States is financial issues. So, you know, did financial issues exist in the past for previous generations? Yes. But which generation is having more financial issues at an earlier age than any other generation in recent memory, maybe the last 100 years? Gen Z. So when you look at Gen Z and our ability to start families, it's not just that it's expensive to start a family today, but even after you start that family, if finances are rougher, we might see more divorces in our generations. We really do have the odds stacked against us in a way that I think most generations haven't seen. And I get the whole argument about, oh, you kids are so pampered. You have air conditioning and you have heat and you have technology and you have shows. But it's like, I mean, that's all good and well. It keeps us comfortable. But if you're actually losing ownership of your life and losing the ability to do the meaningful things in life, like start a family, like progress in a career and feel like you have meaning in your career, like start a business with a great idea and be able to innovate or manifest, you know, what you feel is your purpose in this life. It's kind of like, I get that we have more comfort, but we also have new obstacles that other generations haven't seen.
You would have hoped. Schools and colleges have struggled to adapt to a digital world. They've ignored creative and entrepreneurial advancements, and instead are stuck living in the past, leading to kids being unprepared for the real world. So with no one raising the generation, people are developing all their thoughts and morals on social media, from TikTok influencers or people like Andrew Tate.
Something has to happen, which the Matrix has not prepared itself for.
Once again, creating further divide and leaving all the power with big tech companies. And now let's say you're a fluke in the system and you stop rotting in your bed and get up and somehow land a job. Well, you still wouldn't be able to get a house. Rents are astronomically high and mortgages used to take 3 to 4 years to save up for, but now instead it's 10 plus years to never. This leaves Gen Z, literal grown adults, 24, 25-year-olds, living with their parents as it's not feasible to move out.
Yo, that's actually one of my biggest frustrations with American culture, and I'm kind of talking more the white American culture. My best friend is Middle Eastern. You know, he's talked to me about it a number of times. He goes, this idea that you have to move out of your parents' house when you're 18, 19, 20, if you're there when you're 20 plus, you're a bum. That doesn't exist in our culture. He talks about how his parents and other Middle Eastern parents, specifically Assyrians, have this idea that, no, we actually want to keep our kids close to us for as long as they'll allow us to. And we want to keep our kids close to us so that they can be better set up financially, so that morally they can have us trying to guide them in the right way, and so that we can take care of them, right? And it makes sense. Having that big household makes everything easier, right? If you're going to cook meals anyways, as a mother, let's say, or as a wife, you're going to cook meals anyway for your husband. Why not have those two kids be able to piggyback off of that same cooking session versus everyone lives in separate houses and now you have to spend the time cooking 4 times or 3 times? You get what I'm saying? It allows all of the work to be done together and maybe split up in a way that doesn't waste as much time, waste as many resources, and you can actually help each other to get ahead. So this whole American culture of you have to move out by 20 something or you're a bum. I just disagree with it. And it's been so ingrained in us that, even as I'm saying that, I feel as though, oh, well, it's a good thing that I live in my own apartment, because if I didn't, I would feel weird saying this. Our culture is so individualistic, it's almost toxic. We need to be collective so much as thinking about how we can help each other. I'm not saying that in some collective communist way, but I think America is almost too individualistic.
So what are you going to do with your life?
And when you understand all of this, there's no shock that Gen Z has a deep-rooted desire to hate the system they've been told to follow, with many romanticising the idea of living off-grid in a van or a log cabin somewhere. But it highlights the severity of the situation Gen Z has been placed in. The hatred for the system is further fueled by economic instability as inflation erodes the value of money, whilst income stays the same, driving rates of crime, fraud and depression. So, I ask again, why change? Gen Z cannot afford to live, nor can they afford to retire 50 years down the line. The world is falling to bits with Western nations like the UK and USA collapsing, and with constant fear-mongering, multiple wars and no hope for the future, can you really blame Gen Z for being on that damn phone? You see, I would love to give the verdict that it's all going to be okay, or you've just got to follow this simple fix. Either all workarounds have been patched April 2024, or I don't find this to be the case. I was born in 2005, a Gen Zer myself. I'm meant to wake up every day and work towards something that is strictly unobtainable in the current climate of the world. And as I said earlier, Gen Z isn't blind to the chaos unfolding around them. They're aware of the economy, the unaffordable housing, and the bleak prospects for the future. And yet, amidst the rubble of broken dreams and shattered norms, yes, there may be millions glued to technology and addictions in the realm of bliss ignorance, but there's also a flicker of defiance, a refusal to accept the status quo. People do want change, and in ways the world's never seen before, Gen Z can create that change. But this won't be easy. Gen Z isn't just battling political issues or the relentless scroll of social media, but also far more extreme factors, from the rise of artificial intelligence and automation that can soon take the jobs of millions.
I try to convince people to slow down AI, to regulate AI.
Worsening unemployment, digitization, and the generation's mental health. But don't worry, it's not just Gen Z that has to fix this issue alongside all the other issues I've raised. It's everyone. Because if there's one thing that stood prominent over the last decade, is there are many odds that need to be defied. The future of Gen Z is no exception. This is the revolution of a generation, and it's only just begun.
I think the one issue that we need to focus on collectively as a big political issue is fixing our economic system. Because when you talk about screen maxing, being flooded with dopamine, some of what he's talked about earlier, look, that's up to the individual, right? Like America, the world, the Western world, we are an individualist society to the point that you get to decide what you want to do with your life, and I get to decide what I want to do with mine, and I can think you're an idiot for the way that you live your life, and you can think that I'm an idiot. But that's what freedom is, right? Is allowing people to, if they want to screen max, or allowing people to, if they want to eat healthy and go to the gym, eat healthy and go to the gym. So as far as that goes, I think that's an individual problem that people need to solve. Now, is social media highly addictive? Should we maybe do something to add sort of warning labels to that? That's a whole debate we could get into. But the one issue that people do not have individual control over, maybe as much as social media or these other things, is the global economy. Specifically, the problem that we're dealing with is that we have a fiat currency in America. What is a fiat currency? Our dollar is not tied to gold, which means the federal government can print as much of it as they want, create it out of thin air. And as we learned in elementary school, if anything can be created out of thin air, then the whole supply and demand curve gets thrown off. Inflation is incredibly high, and that's what we're seeing today in America. Our money is not real. The government just creates it whenever they want to. What's the problem with that? When you get your stimulus checks, like we saw during COVID, and you spend that money on necessities like food, like tires for your car, whatever you need, that money just ends up going filtered back to the top, or the people who own the means of production, the guy who owns the tire shop, the guy who owns the grocery store, right? Or the guy who manufactures whatever. I say that to say, in our current system, all of this money, as soon as it gets added in, goes back to the top. And then what do the people at the top do? It's like Monopoly. They can purchase property, pricing out Gen Z, pricing out future generations from ever being able to own homes. And then they can sell it back to us in this subscription model that's called renting. And so the real problem in my mind is fiat currency, and specifically the speeding up of debt that we've had in America. How do we exit that? Because this guy's saying, look, I wish I could tell you there's a solution. I don't see one. For me, I look at it and say, yo, I really truly believe that doing more and more business in Bitcoin is a solution. Is it the solution? No. Is it a long-term solution? No, not necessarily, because the government's going to try to tax Bitcoin. There's battles that are going to need to be had over time. But the difference with Bitcoin is that it's a deflationary currency, whereas the dollar is an inflationary currency. The government can go, oh, you know what? I need $5 billion to go bomb Iraqi children this month. So we're going to create that out of thin air. We're basically going to steal it subliminally or secretly from the working class, but we're going to print it and then we can go and spend it. And I'm sorry that your purchasing power is down, but we really need these dead kids and we need to drop more bombs because our investors are counting on us. That's what Congress does, right? That's the problem with our money system as it exists today. With Bitcoin, they can't create it out of thin air. There's a finite amount of it that's created. So with this whole system that's spiraling out of control with debt, it's like, okay, well, what if we use Bitcoin so that the government can't create it out of thin air? What if that becomes the premier currency of the world, the reserve currency instead of the US dollar? And on top of that, what happens if we start bartering more? I really do believe in this idea of a barter-based system. For instance, okay, let's pretend that I have a service-based business. Let's pretend that I'm an electrician, you're building a house, and I can do the electrician work for your house. Let's pretend that you're a plumber and you can do the plumber work for my house, okay? In the typical economy as it's set up today, in the way that the US government loves, you're going to bill me, okay, and I'm going to bill you, and we're going to have to pay some of our money, maybe 30, 40, 50% of what we make to the federal government, and there's going to be sales tax on our transactions, and so by the time we exchange services, the government has stolen half of our labor. Now, if we barter, I can go, hey man, I'll do your electrical work for free if you can do my plumbing over here for free. We'll just take care of each other, call it even. Well, now the government can't steal half of our labor, which really translates to half of your time. So by changing the currency that we use, by using more bartering systems, I think we can start to be sort of, throw a stick in the cog of the federal machine that wants to steal all of our money. And that's really the problem with our financial system and the government as a whole. It's all designed to extract the wealth of workers. We're just ants, and people get so caught up in this left-right paradigm. Oh, I believe we should pay more taxes because of this. Okay, here's my problem with Democrats that think we should pay more taxes. Your tax money is not going to the program that you think it is. Oh, I really think we should help people who are starving, so we need to pay more in taxes so we can help them. You know what's going to happen? 50 years from now, you're going to find out that 90% of the money going to that program is actually being skimmed, is actually going to somebody that it shouldn't. That's the problem with government programs. People just find ways to steal money from it. Look, I'm not saying that we shouldn't take care of people who are hungry, who need help. We should help those in need. But man, Gen Z, we got to figure out more and more ways to just throw wrenches in the cogs of this shitty system that the federal government has to steal all of our wealth, keep us unhappy and separated. We got to be our own individuals, man.